Hey guys, welcome to the Learn Feng Shui podcast, where you'll learn Feng Shui from a classical point of view, taking out the myth and superstition. So if you're interested in learning Feng Shui, Chinese astrology, all things Chinese metaphysics, as well as the superstitions and myths that connect it all, you'll enjoy learning Feng Shui with me. Hey guys, let's talk about getting our kitchen ready for the holidays and a Feng Shui for the kitchen. All right, guys, we're gearing up for the holiday season and, kind of whether you cook or not, it doesn't really matter, I suppose. But, we tend to use our kitchen a lot, even if we're not cooking. So even if you're getting the takeout, what are some things we can do to prepare, especially our kitchen, for the time of year where it tends to get used the most? So we're going to look at some things we can be prepping in our kitchen, some deep cleaning, decluttering, and we're going to talk about kitchen forms in today's episode. I forgot to tell you, I'm Candace Berlanga, certified Feng Shui practitioner, writer and professional, and your host for the Learn Feng Shui podcast. So let's get into all things Feng Shui, kitchen, and preparing for the holidays. All right, guys, so let's kind of start with the deep cleaning in our kitchen. So it really is kind of a time of year where we kind of need to take assessment and look at decluttering. I think stuff tends to pile up in our kitchen. So again, as I mentioned, even if we don't cook, like I could get takeout all week long, all weekend, whatever, and my kitchen still has to be cleaned and it still gets messy. So no matter if you cook or not, this kitchen just gets a lot of use. We eat there, we put our food there. But when we start thinking about the holidays, again, I know I do a lot of baking. I love baking. I don't cook as much as I used to because my kids are all big, but one thing I kind of noticed we need to take assessment of is the cabinets and the pantry. Those are the two main things. So when we're looking at our cabinets, kind of decluttering, just kind of take it slow and think about one cabinet at a time. Maybe look at some professional organizers. I don't have that capacity, but I know that my cabinets get out of control, and usually doing one thing at a time just helps me feel less overwhelmed than organizing my entire kitchen in one go. And so usually what I'll do is I'll just kind of take that drawer, once you get a system down, you have things organized. It really does help a lot, especially if you have the little, container within the drawer, whatever that has, a little slot for everything, right? And so throwing out the, unusable or plastic forks and spoons, just stuff like that. One little thing at a time, one drawer at a time. And when we look at our cabinets, things like Tupperware, getting rid of the ones that don't have lids, things that are broken. And then, of course, if we have extra pots and pans, maybe you want to donate something like that to a women's shelter and kind of clear that out a little bit so it's not overflowing out of your cabinet, Another area, I think, and this is just a kind of a good one to assess this time of year because we do tend to do more baking, I think, is the spice cabinet. And so my spices were out of control. I like spices and I like buying different flavors of stuff. And so they tend to accumulate and sometimes they don't get used as much and they do expire. So check the expiration dates of the spices. And just kind of organize them. I found at Walmart the other day a really cool little spice rack that kind of gives you an extra shelf behind everything so you can see it. And so that was really handy. You don't have to go out and buy all the organization stuff, but sometimes it does help quite a bit, When we're looking at the pantry, again, same type of concept, one shelf at a time. And it is a time of year where we want to assess our canned goods and donate and the stuff that we're not going to use and throw away stuff that is expired. It really kind of blows my mind because I feel like I'm pretty diligent on my canned goods and on my pantry items. But the other day I went through and I looked at some stuff that expired a couple years ago. It's I don't even know how I missed that, right? So yeah, stuff just kind of tends to accumulate in the pantry. So throw away and donate things that we're no longer using or expired, okay? So yeah, that's kind of it for organizing. Let's get into kitchen forms and talk about what makes good feng shui in our kitchen. Okay. So, the kitchen from a feng shui perspective does symbolize your health, and in some schools of thought, it does symbolize also your prosperity. And if you tend to use your kitchen a lot or you cook a lot, it does impact you kind of greatly. So, there is a few things here that you can, and particularly with forms, which is the way the stove is set up. So, particularly with the forms of the space, there's some rules you want to follow. So, it is believed that the kitchen should not be smaller in relation to your master bedroom. And in a larger house, your kitchen should be fairly large, in proportion to the house. But again, your master bedroom should not be any larger than the kitchen. Okay. So, that's just kind of a rule of thumb there. From a forms perspective, kitchens really shouldn't be located directly in the center of your home. This is a formation called fire burning the heavenly heart, and these kind of speak to your health issues. So since it does symbolize health, long term, if you cook a lot on a stove rather than or if it's directly in the center of your home, it can definitely have an impact on your health long term. So you might not feel it for a while, but maybe there's a year that comes in that one of the family members, starts having some kind of long term health issues, and it could be from the stove. Okay. So your stove should have a backing too. It shouldn't really be on an island. So same type of concept as fire burning the heavenly heart. Stoves should not be on the island, but rather have a backing kind of like the bed, be placed up against a wall for the support. Stoves also shouldn't be under slants, slopes, beams, because it is said to suppress the energy and also cause the long-term health problems. If you have a 2-story house, you should not be positioned directly over a stove like your bed or a study desk. It is said to create a fiery temperament. And stoves should also not be facing a bed. So maybe you have a smaller home that maybe it's an efficiency, put a little partition between your bed and the stove, and they kind of block the energy. And stoves also should not be facing a door directly. So if you have a back door, if your stove directly faces it, maybe put up a little partition or place a plant between the two, somewhere. And the plant can help to redirect the energy. So if you do practice BTB, or you like the idea of placing items out, stuff like that, in BTB traditions, it is said that you can place a mirror on the backsplash of your stove, and it is said to double prosperity, since from that perspective, it represents prosperity and that fire energy. Or you can turn on all the burners for a certain amount of time each day to promote that prosperity and that fire energy. So if you'd like to do that, like if you don't tend to cook a lot, this might be a good one for you to do. But yeah, it is said to promote prosperity and abundance. All right, guys. Well, I hope that helps you kind of prepare your kitchen, get ready for the holidays. Now, we kind of want everything to flow in our home, but we are trying to finish up our work. I know it does give us a shortened work schedule when our kids are off for a week for Thanksgiving break and 2 weeks off for Christmas. And, maybe you work from home, or maybe you are just trying to get everything done so you could take a little extra, some days off, but you need to get it done. I definitely feel this with podcasting and my work. I had to get it done before my kid is home. Last one's still in school. But to do this and to be productive, I've actually been drinking something called Magic Mind productivity drink. So it really helps with the mental fatigue. I was looking for a alternative to coffee. So I do love me a peppermint mocha this time of year, but I do notice that I think the older I get, the more sensitive I am to caffeine, or not necessarily caffeine, but coffee in particular. And I do feel like it does kind of give me that jittery feeling. The Magic Mind productivity drink does also help with the caffeine crash that I experience. Usually mid-morning, I'll get this caffeine crash and I'll feel like I'm like, man, I just want to sit down for a minute, and I just woke up, that caffeine it'll just make you crash. And energy slumps. So I do experience also midday energy slump about 4 o'clock when I go to pick my kid up. I just feel so sleepy. Like I just want to close my eyes and lay down for a minute. So Magic Mind has actually helped really quite a bit with that. I don't feel that energy slump. I've been taking it kind of midday, kind of combat that. And the caffeine does come from matcha, so it's not, to me, I feel like it's a different kind of awakefulness, if that makes sense. It's like, you're just able to be productive and move around without having the jittery, like, feeling sometimes that you get from drinking a coffee. It also has nootropics in it that do help with clarity, and it does help fight the mental fatigue. Sometimes I feel like I just need to, like, no one to talk to me because I just feel so mentally fatigued, not physically, but just my mind is tired and talking is too exhausting for me. And that's not good for podcasting, right? So yeah, I do feel like it's helped with the mental fatigue, and it does have ashwagandha, which helps with stress and anxiety. So that stress and anxiety we can feel around the holiday season, especially when we're busy, doing our holiday stuff and preparing. It's pretty yummy too. It does have agave and passion fruit. And it does kind of remind me of a pineapple flavor with like a earthiness to it. So almost like a wheatgrass shot with pineapple. And I think that's just from the matcha. Pretty dang good. So yeah, they are today's episode sponsor. They'll be sponsoring a few different shows. So I'm excited for that. And I do have a discount code for you guys. If you'd like to try that, you need to be more productive this time of year. You can go to magicmind.com/feng shui. So that's magicmind.com/FENGSHUI. And I'll, of course, include a link in the show notes so you can check that out. For 20% off your first order, go to you can put in code FENGSHUI 20. So Feng Shui 20. That's FENGSHUI 20. So yeah, go check that out. And I think you'll really enjoy it as much as I do. And I'm happy to have them as today's show sponsor. And keeping it kitchen themed, let's go ahead and go to today's Folklore Friday and talk about the kitchen god, a household deity that reports back if you're naughty or nice. From mythologysource.com. Zhao Jun, the Chinese kitchen god. So in Chinese folklore, Zhao Jun is known as the kitchen god. He was a household deity of fire. So how did this male deity become associated with the kitchen? The kitchen god, often called by the name Zhao Jun, was at the center of Chinese family life. Presiding over the stove, he inhabited the heart of the family unit. But unlike other domestic gods, however, Zhao Jun was not primarily concerned with family unity or the protection of the home, but instead his main purpose was to tell the Jade Emperor each year what the family had done and said in private. The household god who reported back to the authorities is uniquely a Chinese deity, and he and his origins reflect not only the structure of Chinese family life, but also the bureaucracy that permeated virtually every aspect of their culture. In Chinese folk religion, Zhao Jun was one of the names used for the god of the hearth. Household deities were common in many cultures, and they served as patrons of the family, protectors for the home, and emblems of domestic life. Zhao Jun also served another purpose, though. He reported what happened in each home to the Jade Emperor. Each year, a few days before the new year, the Lunar New Year that would be, Zhao Jun would leave his place in the home and return to heaven, and he would tell the Jade Emperor what each family had done throughout the year, and blessings and punishments would be given out accordingly. He was not only a spirit of protection, but also kept people accountable. China is somewhat unique in personifying the spirit of the household as a male figure. While the kitchen god spread to neighboring Asian countries, most of these cultures put a goddess in the domestic position where the cooking occurred. And of course, there's some folk tales that go along with this. There is a trigger warning of suicide if anyone is sensitive to that. I feel like in a lot of stories that is a lot the case, right? I'm not sure why. So the two stories here, the first names the kitchen god as the mortal called Zhao Jun, and he was a good man, but also desperately poor, and so much so that he was actually forced to sell his own wife, which is tragic, right? And yeah, women didn't have rights back then, I guess. Years later, Zhao Jun became a servant in the household of his wife's new husband. Talk about karma. And this man is wealthy, and Zhao Jun's former wife lived very comfortably. But upon seeing how poor and saddened her former husband was, she actually took some pity on him and slipped him several homemade cakes, but into the cakes she actually baked some money. He, of course, didn't know the true value of the gift and sold the cakes because he was a jerk for penance. When he realized his mistake, he was so ashamed and brokenhearted that he took his own life. The gods did take pity on him, however, and spared him punishment that was usually promised to people who committed suicide. And instead, he was given the position of the kitchen god, which means he could remain near his beloved wife. In another story, the god was originally named Zhang Lang. He was blessed with a faithful and devoted wife, but he carried on an affair with a much younger woman. Zhang Lang abandoned his wife for his young mistress, and in punishment, the gods struck him blind, as they should. Unable to work or care for himself, Zhang Lang fell into poverty, and his lover deserted him, and he was forced to beg for food. One day, his former wife found him begging in the street, and she invited him into her home and offered him food because he could not see her and didn't even recognize her. So Zhang Lang's wife cared for him, and he told her the story of how he ended up betraying his wife and was in this desperate situation. So he wept as he told her of his betrayal and how he suffered so much afterwards. The wife listened to him and told him to open his eyes, and his sight was actually restored, and he could see the woman who had taken care of him once again. He was so ashamed, though, by his treatment of the wonderful wife that he threw himself into her fire. And although she tried to save his life, she was only able to pull his leg out. In his memory, his wife placed a shrine above the stove where he died, and the gods allowed him to return to the kitchen so he could be reunited with the wife he had not appreciated in life, in which I don't think I would be so happy. So, in both these stories, though, he's made to be the god of the stove, and not because he lived a good life, but because he had missteps and personal tragedies that caused the gods to pity him, and was given a place by the hearth so he could remain close to the wife that actually never abandoned him. He was the one. So, yeah, that's the story of the origins there. Here it says in this modern interpretation that the worship of the kitchen god reflects beliefs about the family and the nation and Chinese culture, but many ancient societies saw the hearth as the center of family life, and it was where meals were prepared, warmth was shared, and often they were sacrifices that were burned to these gods. So the Chinese, however, tied the stove in so closely with the idea of family that was not unusual for a single family to have multiple brick stoves. And I think that was because, okay, so I'll keep reading here. It was because there was multiple families, though. It says it's not unusual in Chinese society for extended families to live within the same home, and grown children often remain in the family home and raise their children alongside their married siblings, aunts, uncles, and grandparents. So this kitchen space was a shared space, and often they would have multiple stoves for multiple family members. It does say here when a man died, his stove would be passed on to the eldest son, and younger married sons would have to install their own stoves, even if the families lived in the same household. So the stove defined the family unit, and a man who used another man's stove was guilty of neglecting the well-being of his own family and children. The origin stories given for the kitchen god emphasize the stove's role as the center of the family unit, and in both, the man abandons his wife and fails to provide for her, but is reunited with her once he is associated with her stove. Many historians have pointed out that Zhao Jun also illustrates the way in which Chinese bureaucracy was reflected in the religion of the people. His presence in the home is not primarily to protect or unite, but instead he acts like a spy and reports behavior to the officials. So this explains, at least in part, why a masculine deity is associated with a traditionally feminine space, and women worshipped a household goddess that served the more traditional role of protection, while men recognized Zhao Jun as a representative of the type of authority that impacted their daily lives. Like many secular bureaucrats, however, it is believed that Zhao Jun could not be bribed, and offerings were made to him not only for his birthday, but also on the day that he was said to make his report. The paper effigy that often hung above the stove was smeared with honey as well, both to sweeten Zhao Jun's lips and to seal them shut. So while the kitchen god's main role was not to bring the family together, he still did so on feast days, and tradition held that the stove could only be properly prepared for the new year if the entire family was present for the holiday. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode about the kitchen and kitchen gods and all things of that sort. So I hope you guys have an amazing holiday. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, that next week will be a replay in order for me to spend time with the family, and I encourage you to do the same thing. So you guys have an amazing holiday weekend, and if you don't celebrate, just have a great weekend, and I'll catch you guys for December's energy update after our replay next week.
For a free energy mapping of your floor plan, please check the link in the show notes. To support today's podcast, go to learnfengshui.com, sign up for emails, leave a review, and share with your family and friends.